practical like that. I've only been driving a few years, but when I first passed my test, my dad, who I get my practical side from, said to me, right, the following things you should always have in the boot of your car. You need a blanket, you need a flask, you need a shovel. And he's right, because whenever I've killed a man, I'm always parched. But what I wanted was somewhere that makes me feel the same way my parents' house makes me feel. They've lived in the same house since they got married 47 years ago. Exactly, and this is what I wanted. I wanted somewhere that I could build memory after memory after memory. Now, I was there sort of late summer last year with my sister, the four of us just sitting around with cups of tea around the kitchen table, putting the world to rights. It was lovely. And at the exact same moment, my sister and I both heard the ice cream man. And it was like no time had passed. No words were exchanged between my sister and I. She shot me a look that said, do you want one? And I shot back a look that said, of course I fucking do. She picked up her purse and she ran out of the house. When she came back in, she told me there'd be no children anywhere near the ice cream man, just a 44-year-old woman running towards it. He'd started to pull away. She had to flag him down. And as she flagged him down, he shouted out of the window, come on, missus, you can do it. She came back in with 3 ice creams, one for me, one for her, and one for me dad, because my mum doesn't really like sweet things. And she said, where's dad gone? Because my dad was no longer in the room. I said, he's gone to the toilet. Now, I don't know what your dads are like, but my dad can lose a good 20 minutes, half an hour in there. So she started to sort of lick her ice cream and kind of tidy his, do you know what I mean? Licking hers normally, but then spinning this one round. She was like a fucking machine, licking and tidying, licking and tidying, licking and tidying. This one started to get quite small, and I said, oh, that's not fair on Dad. And she said, well, what do you want me to do about it? I said, I think you should take it to him while he's on the toilet. And she said, well, if I'm going, you're coming with us. So we go upstairs together. Mum and Dad's toilet is separate from their bathroom. And I said to my sister, before you go any further, you must promise me one thing. She said, what's that? I said, you must promise me that when you open that door, you keep your eyes tight shut, because you will never be able to unsee what you are about to say. She promised. She knocked on the door. My dad said, come in, like it was an office. And with her eyes tight shut, she opened the door and handed in an ice cream. And my dad said, I cannot take that. And we thought, quite rightly, because eating an ice cream while you're doing this shit is disgusting, isn't it? But my dad said, I'm reading the paper, my hands are full. I do spend a lot of time on my own. I live on my own. I do like living on my own, though. When I first decided I wanted to live on my own, my mum and dad don't really understand why people would want to live on their own. My mum said, people only live on their own if they've got no friends. And then my dad made me look up the word hermit in a dictionary. But my dad, he did give me some good advice when I was looking for flats. He said, I don't think you should get one that's got a balcony. What with living on your own, there will be a high suicide risk. Just wondered if I should have been bearing that in mind when I was viewing properties. You know, is that oven gas or electric? Is that light fitting really strong? Could have told a decent weight. 10 stone. Fuck off. 11 stone. And a half. And another fucking half. My parents still reward my sister and I, even though we're 38 and 44, they still do it now. I had to drive in the snow the last time we had really bad snow. I don't like driving in the snow, makes me nervous, but I had a show to get to, there was no alternative, so I got in the car and I drove. And I got there without any real mishap, but I thought I should text the people that knew I was worried about the journey, just let them know I'd arrived safely. So I texted my fella, my agent, and my dad. My fella replied, great, I'll see you later. My agent replied, lovely, have a smashing show. And my dad replied, who's a clever girl? And I just texted back, me! But I took my mum, dad, and my sister out for a nice meal just before Christmas. And midway through the meal, my mum said, when me and your dad go, we're going to go together. I said, what are we talking about now? When me and your dad go, we're going to go together. I said, are you talking about a suicide pact? And she went, no, we're not going to call it that. So I sort of did the what the fuck face at my sister. She quite calmly just said, as long as they leave me a letter explaining it, because I'm not going to go to prison for them. Just getting steadily worse. So I looked at my dad, because my dad's like the voice of reason in our family. I looked at my dad and I said, what do you think about this? And he went, first I've heard of it. He did look genuinely gutted as well. He had massive plans for what he's going to do after my mum had died. My dad's a very friendly man. He likes to talk to people. He likes to talk to everybody. He likes to know people's names. He's the sort of person in a shop, he will read all of the name badges. So if we go in a shop, he gets his change off the lid down the till, he goes, thanks very much. Jean. We're just glad that he stopped staring at an old lady's tit. We got a train last year from London up to Newcastle, me, my sister, my mum and dad. Managed to get a table on the train, awesome work. And we got really cheap first-class tickets because we booked them when I was about 9. And a lady got on the train and sat across from us on her own, and my dad was instantly sort of itching to talk to her. Strange yet must chat. And they did have a very minor conversation. My dad said something like, it's not that cold down here, is it? And the lady said, no, it's much warmer than it is up north. That was it. That was the extent of the conversation. Yet my dad still saw fit, in 10 minutes' time, when the woman removed her cardigan, to go, da-da-da, da-da-da-da. My dad has a mobile phone. He's getting on, he's nearly 70, he's got a mobile phone, and it's mostly for incoming, so me and my sister can text him to see we're all right, or we can ring him if we need him. He's not really bothered about texting out. He finds it a lot of faff, but doesn't really have the patience anymore. So to make his life easier, and fuck knows who taught him how to do this, he set himself a template text, which he sends out regardless of the situation. And the template text says, champion, love dad. Regardless of whether I've won an award or been shitting myself all night, champion, love dad. I've been trying to think of a question that I could ask him where that would be a really good answer. And the only one I can come up with is, Dad, what was the name of the Wonder Horse on the telly in the 80s? But it was about this time last year that I was worried about my family. My mum and dad are both retired and both disabled. And I was worried about them sort of thinking before they put the heating on. You know, it was a very cold winter. Sort of thinking, can we afford it before they put the heating on? And I said, you know what, you've looked after me all these years, including the 2. I moved back in after I got divorced. Never have kids, because I never properly fucking leave. I said, maybe I could start giving you a bit of a hand. Maybe I could start paying your heating bill. Not happy, not happy. Very proud people, my parents. There was a lot of sort of wrestling went on. I mean, verbal. I went to have my dad on the floor, popping out hips willy-nilly. And they eventually agreed. They still weren't happy about it, but they agreed it's the most sensible option, started to pay for the heating bill. A month later, I went to visit them. My dad opened the front door, and he was just wearing vest and pants. And I went, Dad, it's 3 in the afternoon. Why haven't you got any clothes on? It's boiling in there. And I heard my sister shout from the kitchen, we've never even been on holiday anywhere this hot. So I bought a blusher. And you know how makeup, all the colours have names these days, don't they? My blusher is called Orgasm. I was like, why does it have to be called Orgasm? Why can't it just be fucking peach? I mean, peach. It would be more fun if makeup was a little swearier, though, wouldn't it? I like your nail varnish, thanks very much. It's called Shittin' Red. But my sister was determined to embarrass me in front of our parents, and she went, tell Dad what your blusher's called. No. Tell Dad what your blusher's called. No. I said, look, we're 35 and 41. Are you really going to reduce us to children? She went, tell Dad what your blusher's called. I said, right, shut up, I'll tell him. So I said, Dad, he's going to limber up for this kind of conversation. I said, Dad, he went, uh-huh. I went, me blusher? My blusher's called orgasm. And he thought he'd do a funny joke, and he said, when you put it on, does it make your face do this? And I went, whoa! Whatever you're about to do, you must never do when I am there. Are you an eager beaver or a late bloomer? If you're a late bloomer like me, then my new show is just for you. Late Bloomer is available now to stream and download from my website, sarahmillican.co.uk.